4,500 years, I have watched the sun god rising over the river Nile. Much has happened in this time. Many things have changed. But one thing is still the same: the special character of the people of the Nile. Their ingenuity is demonstrated in innumerable ways. Since you have gained access to the writings of the ancient Egyptians and have been able to decipher the hieroglyphics, you have been able to form some idea of daily life and conditions in ancient Egypt. Its culture was the first fully matured, advanced civilization in the Western world. The land of the pharaohs spread its influence towards Europe and Africa. Two continents owe their early development to this country. And that's what I will tell you about the people of this country, the history of its civilization, about the treasures they created in the past 5,000 years, and about how they live today. Let us start where it all began. The desert, in which scorching winds, temperatures well above 35 degrees Celsius, and never enough rain do not allow vegetation to become established. Only in those places where moisture does not immediately evaporate in the heat can life take hold. Only the toughest plants, which need very little water, can exist on this almost infertile soil. A few species of animals, too, have adapted over millions of years to these harsh conditions, like these wild camels we still find in Egypt today. They must constantly search for food, and even more vitally important, for water. A place where there was water yesterday can be a dried-up waterhole today. The Nile is Egypt's life-giving artery, running between the west of the Libyan desert and the east of the Arabian desert. The Nile's 1,200 kilometers represent the longest fertile riverbed in the world. Without its water, all of Egypt would be a hostile desert. The narrow, fertile strip on either side of the Nile is sometimes less than 1 kilometer wide. Only parts of central Egypt achieve the record width of 17 kilometers. The Nile Valley was one of the earliest inhabited areas on the earth. But the habitable area is continually shrinking, while the desert advances relentlessly. Surrounded by desert and subject to the whims of the Nile, Egypt has only survived thanks to its system of irrigation, famous even in ancient times. Devices for raising water and water wheels of various types driven by oxen or donkeys are nowadays more often replaced by water pumps to feed a network of irrigation ditches. The fertile Nile mud, left by the annual flooding between July and October, is the ideal soil for agriculture. Only 35,000 square kilometers, that is 3% of Egypt's total land area, is fertile, cultivable land, from which Egypt now as then, must feed itself. These are the banks of the Nile Delta, the few oases, and a narrow coastal strip. In the places where there is water, a blooming paradise with rich harvests, even several times a year, results. The people do not go hungry. Our path back into history leads us first to the south. We start our journey at the roots of Egypt's history, the southernmost boundary of Upper Egypt. We follow the road along the bank of the Nile. About 200 kilometers south of the city of Aswan, on the bank of the dammed-up Nile, facing the vast expanse of Lake Nasser, we find one of Egypt's most beautiful rock-cut temples, Abu Simbel. Here, 4 statues of King Ramses II are cut into the solid rock in one single piece, a technique previously unknown. The art of construction reached a high point in the time of Ramses. Visitors look tiny compared to the colossal figures. This is a damaged, seated figure of Pharaoh. Underneath the world-famous facade, there is a series of statues of falcons and kings, and smaller statues of the members of the royal family. Ramses II, ruler in the 19th dynasty, was one of the most active builders of all those before or after him. This rock temple was built during his lifetime, around 1260 BC. It is truly amazing that the masons, faced with such enormous dimensions, managed to get the proportions right and to check them, as the original location of the temple was so close to the Nile that there was no room to step back and have a look. The sculptures are monumental, but aesthetically satisfying. They express completeness and harmonious beauty. A second temple complex was dedicated to the wife Nefertari and the cult of the goddess Hathor. This temple represents a miniature reproduction of the larger complex. Alternating statues of Ramses and Nefertari, 10 meters in height, divide and decorate the facade. The walls are covered with elaborate inscriptions. The layman can only gaze in wonder. The watchman at the entrance to the great temple of Ramses holds a key in his hand, the symbol of life. Now let's go inside the complex itself. The ceiling is richly decorated with illustrations of stars and vultures in flight. The Ramses figures are 10 meters high and depict the pharaoh as Osiris, the god of the underworld. After 24 years of glorious reign, Ramses II gradually became a god on earth. The innumerable illustrations on the walls of every room depict the king in various positions. The temple is so constructed that the sun, rising above the horizon on the east bank, sheds its light only twice a year on these most sacred sculptures, Ramses and the other gods seated together. The pharaoh briefly escapes from darkness. For thousands of years, the Nile has hollowed out its bed in the Nubian chalk. Today, it washes against one of the most beautiful islands in Upper Egypt, the Elephantine. The name is derived from the elephant-shaped rocks along its shores. Here was formerly a world-famous trading center for ivory, precious metals, spices, plants, wonder cures, and lots more. Opposite lies the city of Aswan, which experienced a remarkable revival with the construction of the Aswan Dam. Due to its dry climate and warm sand, the city is well known as a climatic resort. On the Elephantine, we can still see the remains of a temple constructed in the 18th dynasty by Amenhotep III, later destroyed by the Persian king Cambyses. Opposite the city, beyond the Elephantine, lies the mausoleum of the Aga Khan, who died in 1959. He wanted his last resting place to be here on the fringe of the desert, with a view of the city he called the most beautiful in the world from the steep cliffs of the left bank. Now let's leave Aswan again and take a short excursion on Lake Nasser to the south, passing by the island of Agilkia. This temple complex, dedicated to the goddess Isis, used to stand on the island of Philae. This gem of Egypt's cultural heritage threatened to sink forever in the floodwaters of the Nile after completion of the Aswan Dam. Just as the body of Osiris was brought back to life after he had been torn to pieces by Seth and thrown into the Nile, tenderly put back together again by Isis, the Philae temple was transported piece by piece to the neighboring island of Agilkia and reconstructed there, an amazing modern reincarnation. The temple also bears traces of Roman and Greek architectural influence. It was built comparatively late in Egypt's history, 378 BC, in the 30th dynasty, under the ruler Nectanebos I. Here, the particularly beautiful part of the building, the incomplete pavilion of Trajan. In the Roman period, the Isis cult was at its height. Long after other Egyptian temples had been closed, their shrines desolated, sacrifices were still made to Isis at Philae. Only in 550 AD did this last stronghold of the old religion disappear. We now turn northwards to another temple complex in Edfu. The pylon, 36 meters high and 64 meters wide, is the second largest in Egypt after Karnak. A magnificent 2-meter-high granite statue of Horus, the falcon god, guards the entrance to the temple. The sober but powerful lines of this magnificent sculpture provide one small example of the artistic genius of the Ptolemaic period. The construction of this temple complex started in 237 BC and was not completed until 180 years later. On the outer walls, the monumental reliefs of the temple's patrons, Horus and Hathor. The main temple is the best preserved in the whole of Egypt. The roof of the temple is borne up by multicolored composite capitals of stylized plant elements. Against the light of the midday sun, we see the trapezoidal temple of Dendera. It is one of 3 from the later period in Upper Egypt, dedicated to the goddess Hathor, the wife of the falcon god Horus of Edfu. A large part of the temple courtyard was destroyed by the Copts, who wanted to convert the temple into a church. The temple of Dendera is closely linked to the one at Edfu. In ancient times, the Egyptians annually celebrated a feast with a great floating procession in which the statues of the gods Horus and Hathor visited each other. But let's leave the temples of the southern part of Upper Egypt and continue on our way to Luxor, Thebes, Karnak, and the Valley of the Kings to visit the people who today live right next to these historic sites. Changes are also taking place in the rural areas, but much more slowly than in the city, and therefore less noticeably. In Egypt today, the struggle against illiteracy and the provision of basic education has priority. Today, it is accepted that children go to school, and already 80% do so. This figure is growing with each new school year. Sites such as these can be seen everywhere on the Nile. They will not disappear overnight. If not the daughters of these women, then the granddaughters will one day have a modern household with running water and electricity. Among mules, horse-drawn carts, camels and donkeys, humble everyday means of transport, the motor car. It is more and more the dominant vehicle, a clear sign of growing prosperity. Besides rice and cotton, the cultivation of sugarcane is a major factor in the Egyptian economy. Harvesting takes place between the months of January and April. The largest plantations are in Upper Egypt, close to the town of Armant, south of Luxor. The sugarcane trains often stand for days alongside the broad fields until they are filled to the brim. A picture of the eternal Egypt. But the observer must hurry if he wishes to enjoy these traditional sites. Time and again, one is tempted to compare illustrations of the pharaonic period with pictures of life on the land today. In the meantime, Egypt has opened the door to the modern world. The pattern of village life changes. The Nile still irrigates Egypt, but with the Aswan Dam, Egypt's industrial and agricultural future has definitely begun. The famous gaunt cows will become part of history, and it is conceivable that one day the desert will be pushed back. Famines which afflict other parts of Africa are a thing of the past in Egypt, a major step forward. Certainly, the seemingly romantic bustle still predominates in the streets, but the rapid developments are also reaching the provinces. The government is encouraging schemes for cultivating tropical and subtropical fruits and improving the quality of dates and tomatoes, among other fruits and vegetables for export. Poultry farming must be modernized, fishing made profitable. There are even plans to produce electricity in isolated desert areas by means of wind turbines. Such ingenuity would excite even the pharaohs in their tombs. Karnak, main cult center of the ancient gods and one of the largest, most impressive temple complexes of ancient times. The ruins are 1.5 kilometers long and 800 meters wide. Karnak is not a temple in the conventional sense, designed and built to a definite plan, but a gigantic temple city. No other place in Egypt creates such a lasting impression on the visitor as this apparent chaos of walls, pillars, obelisks, statues, reliefs, and wall paintings. Since the beginning of the 12th dynasty, 1991 BC, when Thebes was the capital of the Egyptian Empire, over a period of 2,000 years, the temple at Karnak was constantly being built, torn down, extended, enlarged, and made more beautiful. At the entrance to the temple are the famous rams. The ram was the sacred animal of the god Amun. After his fusion with the sun god Re, from the 12th dynasty onwards, the god Amun-Re ruled the world of the gods. One of the best preserved ruins is the small temple of Ramses III. 24 Osiris pillars surround its courtyard. Here is a monumental statue of Ramses II, made of rose granite. In the northwestern corner of the Holy Lake, open only for ritual boat trips, Amenhotep III had a giant scarab erected, which was regarded as the symbol of hope. The full majesty of art and architecture are expressed in the larger Amun temple. With its 134 giant pillars, it is one of the great achievements of world architecture. It is the most impressive and the most famous part of the temple complex, which inspires awe and perplexity. The pillared hall symbolizes a sacred grove, the pillars representing the trees. Their construction was surprisingly simple. First, the lower sections of the pillars were set on their bases. Then, the entire interior was filled with broken bricks and sand to a level at which the next section of the pillar could be mounted, then leveled off again with sand, and so on. When the sand and ballast were removed, the reliefs could be carved and painted at a convenient height. Weeks and months would be needed to study all the hieroglyphs, wall paintings, and reliefs in the temple complex. If only the ancient Egyptians, who were the first in the world to invent an alphabet with 24 letters, had stopped at that, we could all read hieroglyphs. Unfortunately, in the course of the centuries, the priests developed over 700 other symbols, which could easily have been written with the original 24 letters. So generations were kept guessing about the long-forgotten meaning of the inscriptions. Finally, in 1822-24, the Frenchman Jean-François Champollion succeeded in deciphering the hieroglyphs. The Temple of Luxor, built in the 18th dynasty around 1400 BC, served as the ceremonial setting for the feast of Opet, where the god Amun, the ruler of the world, was united with the goddess Mut, thus making the earth fertile. The new year and the new planting season were celebrated at the same time. People streamed in from all parts of the province to attend this festival. After 10 days, they set off in procession overland to the great Amun temple at Karnak. A close connection existed between the two. The Luxor temple was also extended and enlarged over the centuries. Amenhotep III and Ramses II were mainly involved in its original construction. The White Tower belongs to a mosque built in the ancient Ramses courtyard around 1300. This anachronism was tolerated by the Egyptians. Thus, the site of Luxor has been dedicated to religious worship for over 23 centuries. Today, a tourist can cover the distance between the two temple complexes of Luxor and Karnak in one of the popular horse-drawn coaches known as Kalesh. We leave the east side and the old city of Thebes to visit the left bank of the Nile. There, where the sun goes down every day, is the realm of the dead. In earlier times, only workers and craftsmen were allowed to live on this bank, inheriting the task of building and decorating the temples and the tombs. If they left their village, they were punished. Their descendants can be found among the dealers, travel guides, and alabaster vase makers who greet the tourist here today. Where sugarcane plantations and the desert meet stand the colossi of Memnon. An earthquake cracked the northernmost figure. Because of the variations in temperatures and humidity, especially in the early morning hours, air gently vibrating in the cracks produces a fine ringing sound, Memnon's song. Memnon rests firmly on his throne, thousands of tons of limestone. He regards with serene composure the forces of nature and the passing of time. This funeral temple, built by Ramses II, also known as the Ramesseum, was dedicated to the god Amun. It has suffered more from earthquakes and time than from man. The many fragments of figures, walls and pillars give us an idea of just how impressive this building must have been. Looking through the pillared hall of the Ramesseum, we see a gigantic toppled statue of Ramses II. The Persian king, Cambyses, is said to have ordered that the colossal statue, which weighed about 1,000 tons, should be toppled from its pedestal and destroyed. The endeavors of Ramses II to promote the monumental style led to no simplification of individual forms. On the contrary, work was completed down to the finest detail, as can be seen clearly in this black granite statue of a king. This wonderful wall relief depicts Ramses receiving the king's insignia from the god Amun and his wife Mut. Another sacred relic, Medinet Habu, built about 150 years later by Ramses III, is a copy of the Ramesseum, but is in good condition. The walls of the temple, protected by a castle wall, are covered with paintings and reliefs, which are not only artistically of special interest, but also of historical importance. They depict important events which occurred during the reign of Ramses III. The large stone sculptures show some of the energy which is typical of the beginning of the Ramessean period. One of the most individual buildings in Egypt is the Temple of Queen Hatshepsut. Cut out of the mountainside, this monument represents something completely different, unique in Egyptian architecture. With its trees, flower beds, sphinxes and statues, it must have been overwhelming to behold. Only 30 minutes on foot through the mountains brings us to the Valley of the Kings. To date, over 60 royal tombs have been discovered here, but archaeologists are agreed that there are still undiscovered tombs in the area. For a period of 400 years, the rulers of 3 dynasties, their wives, children, and their highest civil servants located their tombs in the mountains of Thebes. These eternal resting places were decorated with unbelievable splendor. Altogether, more than 450 tomb complexes have already been found and explored. Here, the entrance to the tomb of Ramses VI. It was not possible to carve reliefs into this brittle, crumbling rock, so a surface of plaster and ground stone was applied to the walls prior to painting. The vast number of illustrations and the precision of execution is breathtaking. From this unique cultural and historical source, visitors to Egypt can see how the Egyptians lived in the world of the living and what they expected to find in the world of the dead. all parts of the body are represented, ready for the afterlife. Persons were depicted in varying sizes, according to their social position. Here is the large sepulchral chamber with the damaged granite sarcophagus. The decorative style here was not based on original designs. It was essentially the reproduction of established patterns. Egyptian art was the joint product of a workshop where artists followed traditional examples. These are the wonderful wall paintings of the sepulchral chamber of Thutmose III. Like architects and the sculptors, painters were taught in a so-called House of Life, a training institution for writers, scientists and artists in artistic creation. Here we can see Thutmose appearing before the seated figure of the god Amun. This fresco from the 19th dynasty shows the goddess Hathor in female form. She bore the god Horus and was worshipped as the goddess of beauty, joy, and intoxication. She was regarded as the oldest celestial goddess and bears the symbol of the sun between the horns. Opposite her is King Horemheb. The state of preservation of the majority of the tomb paintings is extraordinary, as, for example, this scene from the tomb of Inherchal. Nevertheless, extensive conservation measures are needed to protect these treasures from the past. Not only royal tombs inspire us with their beauty. Not far from the Valley of the Kings lie the tombs of the higher civil servants. Here there are many illustrations which show us their worldly goods and their wealth. Then there are scenes from everyday life, like a documentary film of the past. It would appear that the life of the rural population has not changed much in the last 5,000 years. One of the most famous tombs was discovered on November the 4th, 1922. The tomb of Tutankhamun, the son of King Amenhotep IV, who later called himself Akhenaten. He ascended the throne as an 8-year-old and died before he was 17. The Englishman Howard Carter spent 6 years searching for this tomb and finally opened it with his patron Lord Carnarvon on November the 25th, 1922. The hot air trapped inside the tomb for 3,000 years rushed out to meet them. At that moment, no one knew whether any object had been buried with the body. Subsequently, it was discovered that the door had been broken open at some time. On closer inspection, however, the seal of the Royal Cemetery Authority of the 18th dynasty was found intact. This proved that the tomb had not been opened since that date. The sensation caused by this discovery eclipsed all previous discoveries. Egypt experienced Tutankhamun fever. Here in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo lies one of the greatest tomb treasures in the world. One of the 5,000 pieces, Tutankhamun's gold coffin. It weighs 110 kilograms, is made of solid 22-karat gold and has blue inlay work. It is the innermost of 3 coffins, which were exactly fitted to the royal mummy. The king, in the guise of Osiris, holds a scepter and lash, symbols of power and dignity. The mask, also in solid gold, lay directly on the mummified head of the king. The eyebrows and eye makeup are made of lapis lazuli, the eyes of obsidian and white calcite. On the brow, the snake Uto and the head of the vulture goddess Nethbet, tutelary gods of Upper and Lower Egypt. The objects in the tomb are magnificent. This carved wooden throne, covered in gold, is one of the greatest treasures. The Egyptian Museum presents its visitors with examples of all the great epochs of pharaonic art. This painted limestone statue of a scribe seated cross-legged was found in Saqqara from the 4th dynasty, 2723 to 2563 BC. The eyes are made of quartz, the green lid mounts are copper, and the pupils are bronze nails. Also made of limestone, a seated sculpture of the prince Rahotep, brother of Cheops, and his wife Nofet, also from the 4th dynasty. Their facial expressions are so amazingly natural that the workers who found them fled in fear. This wooden statue from the tomb of King Awi is 1 meter 75 centimeters tall. It is also known as the Ka statue because the 2 arms over the head stand for the hieroglyphic symbol Ka and represent everlasting strength. 40 Egyptian soldiers grouped in rows of 4, armed with shields and spears from the tomb of the Prince Meseti in Asyut. This is just a brief glance at the apparently inexhaustible treasures of Egypt's past. Over 100,000 exhibits document a period of over 5,000 years. Just looking at them all would take several days. A first visit to the museum leaves one with an impression of confusion, but it is an essential prelude to an excursion into the valley of the Nile and should be complemented by further visits afterwards. Everything the tourist sees in Upper or Middle Egypt is illustrated in exemplary fashion here. Eventually, everything falls into its chronological and geographical place: gods, kings, scribes, and peasants. We leave the museum and go into the city where the descendants of those who created these treasures, so much cherished today, are still living. At the station in the center of Cairo stands a figure of Ramses II, which was found in Memphis. 10 meters high and weighing 12 tons, it regards with majestic composure the bustling activity of the present day. Cairo, international center in the Middle East, a busy capital, tourists' meeting point, a sea of earthen houses. Visitors find the city dirty. In fact, it is merely veiled by the sand borne in from the desert on the eternal winds. With more than 12 million inhabitants, Cairo is Africa's largest metropolis, perhaps also its most important. Modern hotels along the bank of the Nile and all over the city are a visible sign of the advance of Western culture, which only reached Egypt in the last few years. Up-to-date constructions, Muslim Middle Ages, Orient and Occident, extreme contrasts. All that and much more is Cairo. The oriental atmosphere, the exotic appearance of the colorful crowds in the narrow streets and alleys leave a lasting impression on the visitor. The whole of the old city of Cairo is a giant bazaar where you can buy practically anything. Khan al-Khalili, the most famous bazaar, lies in the middle of Islamic Cairo and has been a trading center for centuries. Alongside the most ordinary things for everyday use, the searching eye will find no shortage of specialities. In the vicinity of Khan al-Khalili, the typical life of the city dweller goes on. This is where the real heart of Cairo is. Unfortunately, too many visitors shy away from close contact with this throbbing and fascinating world. In their air-conditioned, noise-insulated buses, they miss the experience of an unforgettable shopping trip. The main landmark of Cairo is the huge mosque of Muhammad Ali, with Saladin's citadel at its foot, an area protected by walls, battlements and towers. In its time, the strongest fort in the Islamic world and the safe retreat of many a sultan until a gunpowder explosion in 1825 so destroyed the citadel that restoration was no longer possible, and Muhammad Ali ordered the erection of his mosque on the same site. The cupolas shining in the sun are framed by two pencil-slim Turkish minarets. The large inner courtyard is surrounded on all sides by domed galleries. The inner and outer walls, even the floor covering, is made up of the finest pale yellow alabaster, which has also given it the name of the Alabaster Mosque. The decoration is in the ornate Turkish braid style. The Mosque of Muhammad Ali is the latest and most attractive one built since the beginning of Turkish rule in Egypt in 1517 AD. South of the citadel, between Old Cairo and the Mokattam Mountains, which can be seen in the background, lies the city of the dead, sunk in a natural depression. The dismal brownish-yellow landscape of the cemetery merges into the eastern desert. The prominent mosque-like buildings are the tombs of sultans, caliphs, and other personalities from the time of the Mamelukes. Cairo was founded at the same time as Islam. Each century has contributed its own architecture to the city. Minarets rubbing shoulders with skyscrapers. With the sunset, everything melts into a harmonious whole. It is Friday, a day of rest for Muslims, which can be compared to the Christians' Sunday. Practically all the mosques in the city are filled to overflowing, and anyone who cannot find space inside prays outside the door. It is not uncommon for vehicles to stop in the streets when devout Muslims block the way during the hour of prayer. They do this quite naturally without in any way wanting to make a show of themselves. But Friday is also the day of the great camel market in Cairo. Far removed from the actual center of the city, it provides an experience of a special kind. Due to their usually short stay in Cairo, very few tourists have the opportunity of visiting this market. With so much coming and going, it is impossible to say exactly how many animals there are on sale. But there are always at least 1,000 single-humped camels driven into the large marketplace, waiting for new owners. Often, the camels only reach their destination after weeks of trekking along the Nile or the adjacent canals. They may cover more than 1,000 kilometers if, like this herd, they come from the Sudan. After the sale, the road may lead all the way back to Upper Egypt if the buyer comes from Luxor or Aswan. But before the drivers set off with their new herd on the long way home, they take this opportunity for a friendly get-together. At the camel market, the necessary accessories such as saddles and ornaments are also manufactured, of course all handmade. The descendants of the pharaonic artists are as skilled as their forefathers. This carpet weaver is one of the most highly regarded craftsmen, well known even beyond Egypt's borders. His carpets hang in London and Paris. Like this young girl, he began in a carpet weaving school in a small village near Giza. The older weavers have been there ever since the foundation of the school 10 years ago. A German built this school. Children can help with the work from the age of 4. It is a privilege to be allowed to be here. The children enjoy it, and they are pleased to come. Patterns do not exist. What is produced is freestyle, each design an expression of individual fantasy. Whether abstract or realistic, the work which the descendants of the old masters produce is certainly interesting. We now leave Cairo and take a trip back into Christianity's past. We are on our way to the monastery of St. Catherine in the south of the Sinai Peninsula, at the foot of the mountain of the same name. Our way takes us first along the Suez Canal. The Sinai Peninsula is a huge triangle of sand and stones, washed by 3 warm seas. The peninsula is barren today, however it possesses buried treasure. In bygone days, the servants of the pharaohs searched for turquoise, malachite, diorite, and lapis lazuli, extracted the rose-colored sandstone, the purple porphyry, and the black basalt, and here they found the copper for their weapons. These days, the treasures have other names: manganese, phosphates, and oil. Sinai is fascinating. During the journey to the center of the peninsula, we find strange geological formations. Here, powerful stone massifs rise from the lifeless valleys. But then, just when you would least expect it, the palm oasis of Wadi Ferran appears, a verdant green ringed by dry, barren rocks. Mountains and their peaks play a leading role in many an ancient myth, as the visible connection between earth and the heavens, the seat of their gods. This is also true of Mount Sinai, at the foot of which lies the monastery of St. Catherine, our destination. It is an Orthodox monastic center that has existed since the 6th century. Since its erection between 527 and 565 AD in the heart of the Sinai Desert, it has maintained its Christian character. Mohammed, the founder of Islam, Arabian caliphs, Turkish sultans, Napoleon, all took the monastery under their protection and saved it from being plundered. In its long history, it has never been captured, damaged, or destroyed, and has retained its standing as a center for biblical research, where, in the worship of Jesus Christ and the Virgin Mary, the symbolic importance of the events of the Old Testament can be studied and interpreted. "50 years after the death of Akhenaten, Moses fled from Egypt to Mount Horeb in Sinai, where he married one of the 7 daughters of the Bedouin priest Jethro. For 40 years he tended his father-in-law's herds and watered them at the well which can still be seen on the north side of the monastery. Here God appeared to him in the miracle of the burning bush and ordered him to go back to Egypt and to lead the children of Israel to Mount Horeb. 50 days after their flight from Egypt, they reached the Holy Mount, where they received the 10 Commandments. We leave the Sinai Peninsula and head for El Fayoum, Egypt's breadbasket. This, the largest oasis in the country, is an almost perfect circular depression with a diameter of about 50 kilometers, lying about 45 meters below sea level. All plants thrive here. This area is the verdant garden and agricultural center of Egypt. Crops are harvested up to 3 times a year here. A visit to El Fayum is particularly interesting because the everyday life which we already saw as paintings or reliefs on the walls of the tombs of the pharaonic period here is played out live before our very eyes. The Fayum not only provides food for the 1 million inhabitants of the region, but also caters for a large part of Cairo. Every day, vegetables, fruits, poultry, eggs and fresh meat are transported 100 kilometers to the hungry city. The deepest point of the depression is occupied by the Birkat Karun Lake. With an average depth of only 4 meters, it provides the population with a wide selection of fish. The steady retreat of the waters since ancient times means that the fertile soil of the Fayum depression has almost doubled. Since time immemorial, these large and beautiful water wheels have been creaking in El Fayum. Thousands of brooks and irrigation canals, whose original courses have been traced back into the Middle Empire, 3800 BC, today channel the water in this area and thus contribute to the fabled fertility of El Fayum's alluvial soil. Now we leave El Fayum and set off through the desert to the north to the outskirts of Cairo. On the way, we come across the most unusual and monumental constructions made by human hand, the pyramids. The stepped pyramid of Saqqara is thought to be the first pyramid of all. 4,200 years ago, under King Djoser, the inspired master builder, Imhotep, succeeded on his first attempt in constructing a monumental edifice which was not made of ephemeral materials, such as Nile mud or wood, but for the first time of stone. The stepped mastaba stands in the middle of a holy district, which is surrounded by walls over 10 meters high. Approximately 4 kilometers east of Saqqara lie the ruins of the ancient city of Memphis. Here we find this alabaster sphinx. With her expression of gentleness and majesty, she has an enigmatic smile. Weighing 80 tons and 4 meters 25 high, it is said to represent King Amenhotep II. When the Sphinx was discovered, it lay on its right side, which explains the wear on one side, the result of centuries of erosion. The pyramids at Giza are among the most famous edifices and were erected during the 4th dynasty. They were, and still are today, Egypt's most famous landmark. Who can honestly say that he has never dreamt of standing at the foot of these 3 most magnificent examples of building from a bygone age? The Cheops Pyramid, built in 2690 BC, here on the right, is, with its original height of 146.6 meters and a volume of 2.5 million cubic meters, the largest stone construction in the world. On its base area, there is room for Cologne Cathedral, St. Peter's in Rome, and Westminster Abbey all put together. The second pyramid, built by King Chephren, is several meters smaller. On its peak, it has retained its white alabaster casing. The Cheops Pyramid consists of approximately 23 million blocks of stone, each of them weighing 2.5 tons. 4,500 years of erosion have left their traces on the blocks and rounded off the edges. Originally, all the pyramids of Giza possessed shell-like casings, which, however, were systematically dismantled in the Middle Ages. Many a building in old Giza and Cairo probably consists of material from these pyramids, including the Alabaster Mosque in Cairo. Cheops and Chephren did not achieve their objective, which was to build an absolutely secure tomb for their eternal resting place. But on the other hand, they did succeed in leaving behind them indestructible monuments for eternity. The three lesser pyramids of the Queens lie at the foot of the third and smallest pyramid. Architecturally, it is hardly different from the two larger pyramids. Why King Mykerinos was satisfied with a height of only 66.5 meters, to this day no one knows. Our journey back through 5,000 years of Egyptian history is coming to an end. We hope that you have gained a good first impression. Nothing, however, can equal the feeling of awe which overcomes the visitor when confronted with these unique monuments. You who have seen my land can tell others of the fascination, the contrasts, the unsolved puzzles, and of the most amazing treasures ever created on this earth by the hand of man.